Now, I first began to work on metaphor in the following way. I was teaching an undergraduate seminar at Berkeley in the year 1978, and there were 5 students in the class. And on the day we were to discuss a paper on metaphor, one of the women in the class came in late. It was raining, she was very, very wet, and she was crying. And we sat around a little table. We all tried to ignore the fact that she was crying. As I started to go over the paper, saying on page 10, Professor so-and-so says so-and-so, what do you think about this? She turned and said, I'm sorry, I can't do this today. I have a metaphor problem with my boyfriend. And she looked around, she said, maybe you can help. So we said, sure, we can help. We'll try. So she then said, on the way here, my boyfriend said that our relationship had hit a dead-end street. Okay? And she didn't know what this meant. So we said, look, if it has hit a dead-end street, you can't keep going the way you've been going. You have to turn back. Right? And then we realized that English had many expressions for understanding love as a journey. And so we started writing them down. I'm a linguist. We started writing all these down. Dead-end street, going the way you've been going, turn back, and lots more, like the marriage is on the rocks. It's off the tracks. We're spinning our wheels. We're going in different directions. It's been a long, bumpy road. We're at a crossroads in the relationship. All of these words, like crossroads, long, bumpy road, and so on, are different, ordinary words in English. They're all about journeys, and here they apply to love. Even one about airplanes. We may have to bail out, as have a parachute. Now, we made this long list, and then I asked the question, is there any generalization about this list? Is there anything general about it? And we noticed that there were some generalizations, and we could write them down too. That in every case, the lovers were travelers. So we write down lovers, travelers. In every case, the relationship was some kind of vehicle, either a plane, a train, a car, or a boat, but in every case, it was a vehicle. So we write down love relationship, vehicle. Then we said, what about the goals, the traveling, the path? And we noticed that the common life goals of the lovers corresponded to the common destinations that they were going to in this vehicle. Finally, we noticed that in every case, there was some difficulty. That is, in every case, there was either a long, bumpy road or on the rocks, off the track. Something was going wrong. That is, there was a difficulty in getting to the end point. There was some impediment. Impediment means something that stops you, an impediment to travel. And that was the difficulty in the relationship. The difficulties were impediments to travel. Okay? Now, we wrote down this generalization. You could write it down almost like a mathematical mapping. Is there a problem? No? Okay. Almost like the mathematical mapping. And so we were very happy. I said, look, there's a generalization here. Isn't that interesting? And the woman said, I don't care about your generalization. My boyfriend is breaking up with me. He's thinking in terms of this metaphor. Thinking in terms of this metaphor. So I said, how is it possible to think in terms of a metaphor? What does that mean? So we took examples. For example, we went and looked at the expression, we're spinning our wheels in this relationship. Now, in English, the expression spinning your wheels in literal language applies to a car. It's a car that is stuck, usually in the mud or the sand or the ice or the snow, and you try to get it out by putting on the accelerator, the wheels spin and it goes in deeper. And then you push it and you try to get it out. It's very hard. That's the image that you have. So I said, if you're spinning your wheels in a relationship, what do we know about that image? In the image, the car is not moving. In the image, you are trying to get the car to move. You want it to be moving, but it's not moving. In the image, you're making an effort to get it to be moving, and you're frustrated because it's not. So when you say, we're spinning our wheels in this relationship, what does it mean? It means that you're making, the relationship is not moving. It's not going forward. You are not making progress toward common life goals. It means you're putting effort into getting it to make progress, and it means you are frustrated. Okay? That is, everything you know about the domain of travel in this expression is being mapped onto the domain of love via the mapping that lovers are travelers, that the relationship is a vehicle, and so on. Okay? The mapping maps your knowledge and inferences, your reasoning about travel, onto reasoning about love, and that is how it is possible to think in terms of a metaphor. Okay? Now, several things follow from this. Well, first, the young lady did not make up with her boyfriend. They did not get together, but she eventually got a PhD, married someone else, and is very happy, and is chairman of a major linguistics department. So she is fine. Now, there are many things that follow from this example. First, the metaphor is the mapping. You have lots of different words here, lots of words, dead-end street and crossroads and long bumpy road, different words, but one metaphor. And that is, love is a journey, and the way you specify it precisely is via a mapping. Travelers map to lovers. The vehicle maps to a relationship. The impediments to travel map to difficulties, and so on. Those mappings map the way you think about journeys and reason about journeys onto the way you think about love. And they give you a way to think about love metaphorically. Now, this is inconsistent with the traditional theory of metaphor. The traditional theory is from Aristotle. And Aristotle said, this was 2,500 years ago in Greece, Aristotle made a claim. He looked at examples of metaphor in literature, and he said, metaphor is in the words. It's an unusual use of words that is not normal. So first of all, it's not normal. Notice all of the expressions in English that I gave you, the relationship is on the rocks, it's been a long bumpy road. These are normal, everyday expressions. They're not especially poetic. Okay? So one, they are normal. So Aristotle was wrong about that. Two, he said, they're in the words. But we saw you have different words with the same metaphor. The metaphor is how you think about love in terms of journeys. The metaphor is in the mapping from travel to love. So Aristotle was wrong about that too. Aristotle then said that metaphor was based on similarity. there's no similarity between love and journeys outside that metaphor. So Aristotle was wrong about that too. So basically, the theory that Aristotle came up with 2,500 years ago, which has been passed on generation after generation after generation, doesn't work. Okay? It's an incorrect theory. Moreover, according to the Aristotelian account, metaphor is supposed to be unusual, poetic, rhetorical. But here we find it in the most ordinary, everyday thought and language. And that's what all the research on metaphor has shown in the past 25 years. So what we have found in the past 25 years is that metaphor is an ordinary, everyday phenomenon. And we have found that it is in thought. It is primarily a way in which you understand the world in terms of other domains that you have. And we have also discovered that there is a difference between what we call primary metaphor and complex metaphor. Primary metaphors are cases of relatively simple metaphors that arise from your everyday experience. For example, there's a metaphor, and by the way, most primary metaphors are universal. Not quite all, but most of them occur around the world. For example, more is up, less is down. Prices rise, prices fall. Right? That is, the temperature rises, the temperature falls. Right? More is up, less is down. Okay? Now, Now, why is it that more is up and less is down? If I pour water into a glass, the level will rise. If I pile books on the desk, the level will rise. You put more things in. Every day there's a correlation between verticality and quantity. Okay? Now, in your brain, verticality and quantity are represented. Please. Verticality and quantity are represented in two different parts of the brain. There's a part of the brain that computes number. It's in a different place than the part of the brain that computes space and vertical orientation through balance. So what happens is that there's a linkage between these. When they occur together in the world, when they occur together, then you learn neural connections between them. Let me give you other examples. Affection is warmth. Your mother holds you or father holds you affectionately as a child, and it correlates with warmth. And therefore you get metaphors like he's a warm person, a cool person, he's been cool to me, and so on. The idea is you learn hundreds of such basic primary metaphors, and then they fit together to form bigger and bigger ones, and more complicated ones. So the simple ones arise just by functioning in the world as a person while you're a child, mostly. Some while you're an adult, but mostly while you're a child. You learn these conceptually, then they come into the language, and you learn them linguistically, and then they combine, and that's where you get cultural differences in metaphor. And what poets do is they use the ordinary, everyday primary metaphors and put them together in interesting, complicated ways. So what I want to do today is give you examples of this, lots of examples, to show how poetry uses ordinary, everyday metaphor and puts them together in very complex ways to give you a poem. Now, there's not just metaphor in there's poems. There's lots and lots of other things as well. But what we're going to do is just give examples from poetry. Okay? Now, there's a famous poem by Robert Frost, and it says, "Two roads diverged in a wood." You've heard this, you've all heard it, that's why we chose it. "And I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference." Now, two roads diverged in a wood. There's a metaphor that life is a journey. Okay? Now, let's think about this metaphor. We have analyzed it in very great detail. It is based on what is called the event structure metaphor. And the event structure metaphor goes like this. It is a composite of a number of other primary metaphors. It says, states are locations. That is, the state that you're in, are you happy, sad, etc., is understood as a bounded region in space. So you can be in love or in a depression and so on. Now, changes are movements from one state to another, from one location to another, and then a purpose. Your final destination is where you arrive at, and purposes are destinations you're trying to go to, and means to get there are paths. So means are paths, and actions are motions. So, then you have an extension of this metaphor for life. It says there are life goals. Okay, life has purposes, destinations, and you can choose them. Okay, that gives you that gives you a metaphor for life as a journey where you go from purposeful destination to purposeful destination, and so on. Now, when he says two roads diverged in a wood, these are two different ways of life. Okay? Two different ways to live your life. Two different courses of life, going to different destinations. And I took the one less traveled by. I took a path that other people do not take. Right? I chose to live my life differently. And he says, and that has made all the difference. So he is saying it is a good thing not to do what everyone else does, but to take a life that is appropriate to you and to your unique characteristics, and that is different from other people's lives. Okay? That is what that's about when he talks about two roads diverged in a wood. Now, why in a wood? Because when you're in the woods, you cannot see ahead. Okay? Now we have a metaphor that the future is ahead and the past is behind. And that says, in the wood, you cannot see the future. So when the roads diverged, he could not see where they were going. He didn't know where he would wind up, but he took the one that other people didn't take anyway. Okay? And that was a good thing. So there's a reason for in the woods that uses another primary metaphor, and that is seeing is knowing and the future is ahead. Okay? So notice all the metaphors that we have, conceptual metaphors, in just those lines. States are locations. Changes are motions. Actions are self-propelled movements. Purposes are destinations. Means are paths. Okay? Then you have the future is ahead. Knowing is seeing. If you don't see, you don't know. All of those conceptual metaphors are needed to understand those three simple lines. Right? And you don't even notice that you're doing it. What is interesting about this, I read that poem hundreds of times before I studied the theory of metaphor, and I never knew that I was thinking in terms of all of those conceptual metaphors. Okay? So when a poet uses metaphor, he's evoking a whole system of conceptual metaphors that we use every day. Poetic metaphor is not all original. It uses the ordinary things, and what is original is the way it puts the metaphors together. All right, let's take a look at some other cases. Shakespeare in King Lear says, "Thou must be patient. We came crying hither," that is to here. "Thou know'st the first time that we smell the air, we wail and cry." Okay? Now notice a simple thing. We came crying hither. We came hither. Right? Came literally is moving, but there's a general metaphor that existence is location here, birth is coming into existence, that is, birth is arrival, death is departure. Okay? So a dead person is seen as going away, leaving us. A baby is seen as arriving. So we came crying, babies are cry when they're born, hither, here. Okay? So he's using the ordinary metaphor of existence is location here, birth is arrival. Now, we see these so commonly that we often don't notice them. And what I would like to do is go through a whole poem and give you some idea of all the richness of metaphor in that poem. Now, this is a book called More Than Cool Reason by myself and Mark Turner. We wrote it in 1987, published in 89. And it goes through all the types of poetic metaphor. And what we did to start this book, we sat down and we said, how should we start? And I said, look, there's only one clear way to start. We take a large collection of poetry and we open to a random page and we put our finger down. So we opened to a random page, and this was the poem my finger came down on. Because it didn't matter. We didn't pick a poem because it had lots of metaphors. We picked a poem because every poem does. It didn't matter which poem we picked. So we happened to pick this one. And this is by Emily Dickinson. It says, "Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me." I'll read it twice. "Because he could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. The carriage held but just ourselves and immortality. We slowly drove, he knew no haste, and I had put away my labor and my leisure too for his civility. We passed the school where children strove at recess in the ring. We passed the fields of gazing grain. We passed the setting sun, or rather he passed us. The dews drew quivering and chill, for only gossamer my gown, my tippet only tulle. We paused before a house that seemed a swelling of the ground. The roof was scarcely visible, the cornice in the ground. Since then 'tis centuries, and yet feels shorter than the day I first surmised the horses' heads were toward eternity." Okay? Now, let's go through this bit by bit. "Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me." Okay? "The carriage held but just ourselves and immortality." Okay, let's just do that. First, you have, "because I could not stop for death." That means I'm living, and there's a general metaphor that activity is movement. Action is moving around. She could not stop. She's doing so much stuff. She's running around doing so many things, and she's not even thinking about death. Because I could not stop for death. I couldn't even think that death might be there. He kindly stopped for me. She died. But she's viewing death as now a person. What kind of person? The carriage held, let's see, the carriage held but just ourselves. That is, death is a coachman. Death is driving her away in a coach, in a carriage. Okay? Now, why is death a coachman? Why should death be a coachman? Right? Because death is departure. Birth is arrival. Existence is existence here, being here, location here. Death is departure. So the process of death, the phenomenon of death, is understood as what causes death, and death is going away. What causes you to go away is a coachman who drives you away. Okay? So that is what that's about. And immortality, she's a Christian. She believes that when you die, your immortal soul lives on. She's going away. Now, what's interesting about this is that death is departure. If life is a journey, death too is a kind of journey. And so you have a continuous journey of life and then into death. So the poem continues. We slowly drove. He knew no haste. That is, this coachman death was not in any hurry. When you're dead, no hurry. Okay? And I had put away my labor and my leisure too. Stopped working, stopped doing leisure activities for his civility. Death here is seen as civil. That is, not rushed, not in any hurry, but just calm. We passed the school where children strove at recess. Recess is when you take off from school for a period. In the ring where children are playing in the playground. So first, the coach is going past the stages of life. We passed children. We're going past the young part of life. We passed the fields of gazing grain. We passed the setting sun. All right, why the fields of gazing grain? First, why grain? There's a general metaphor, very common, that people are plants with respect to the life cycle. That is, there's seedlings, they sprout, they grow up, they reach maturity, they die. Okay? You can think of people as trees or other kinds of plants, and here it is, grain. Why gazing grain? If you see a field of wheat in the sunshine, during the day, the wheat moves toward the sun. It shifts. So when the wheat is mature, at its peak, it will look like it's looking at the sun. Hence, the gazing grain. Okay? This means that the grain, what's being passed is people at the prime of life. So first they go past the stage of childhood, and you have a metonymy of the children for the child. Then you have the metaphor, the fields of gazing grain, of the grain for people at the prime of life. And then we drove past the setting sun. Why the setting sun? There's a metaphor that a lifetime is a day, and the sunset is death. That is, when it's night is death, sunset is the approach of death, old age. So you're going past youth, maturity, old age in this journey. So it's a journey reviewing the stages of life after you die. The dews were quivering and chill, for only gossamer my gown. Gossamer is very, very flimsy, fine cloth. My tippet only toe, another very fine cloth. That's what corpses were dressed in. Okay? She just had the dress of a corpse. We passed before a house that seemed a swelling of the ground. A swelling of the ground. Why? A grave. The roof was scarcely visible. That's the stone coming out. The cornice, that is the peak of the roof, in the ground. That's the cemetery stone. So, as we paused before a house that seemed a swelling of the ground, the roof was scarcely visible, the cornice in the ground, her grave. Since then, now the journey continues, and yet feels shorter than the day I first surmised the horses' heads were toward eternity. That is, death is a journey also, continuing life's journey, but it goes on forever. The horses' heads were toward eternity. Okay? That's how metaphor is used in a complex poem. And one metaphor after another of the ordinary ones you see every day are you put together to form this complexity. Okay? Now, let me give some other examples of how metaphors like this are used. Metaphors for life and death. Take the life as a journey metaphor. Dante begins the Divine Comedy by writing, "In the middle of life's road, I found myself in a dark wood." In the middle of life's road, I found myself in a dark wood. Very similar to what we saw before. Life's road is life as a journey. In the middle of it, halfway through my life, I found myself in a dark wood. Why dark? You can't see where you're going. Knowing is seeing. You do not know what direction your life is going to take. If you're in the middle of a dark wood, you don't know where the road is going to take you, where it's going to continue. Okay? So this is about confusion in the middle of life. Okay? Or, Shakespeare writes in Macbeth, "And all our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death." Right? Again, life is a journey to death. Okay, we can go on, lots and lots of them, but let me give you a couple of famous ones. T.S. Eliot, in the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock, writes, "I have seen the moment of my greatness flicker." Why flicker? Because life is seen as a fire, and the greatness, that is, the high point of life, is the highest flame. And when a flame flickers, it has a chance of going out. And then if life is a fire and the flame goes out, you die. So I have seen a premonition of death, the moment of my greatness, flicker. And I have seen the eternal footman hold my coat and snicker, and in short, I was afraid. Why the eternal footman? Again, he's the person who's in the carriage taking you away with death. So he sees his death coming. All right? Again, similar metaphors. Now, what I would like to do at this point is take a complicated case. with some more examples and look at some details. Okay. Here, this is Shakespeare's Sonnet 73. It goes like this. That time of year thou mayst in me behold, when yellow leaves, or none or few, do hang upon the boughs which shake against the cold. Bare ruined choirs where late the sweet birds sang. In me thou seest the twilight of such day, as after sunset fadeth in the west, which by and by black night doth take away, death's second self that seals up all in rest. In me thou seest the glowing of such fire, that on the ashes of his youth doth lie, as the deathbed whereon it must expire, consumed with that which it was nourished by. This thou perceivest, which makes thy love more strong, to love that well which thou must leave ere long. Okay, what we'll do is just go through that bit by bit, and we'll go through it several times, sort of looking at the metaphorical structure of this poem. First, that time of year thou mayst in me behold, when yellow leaves, or none or few, do hang upon those boughs which shake against the cold. Bare ruined choirs where late the sweet birds sang. Okay, what time of year it is? Is it autumn? What is the metaphor? The overall metaphor of these 4 lines is that a lifetime is a year, and if a lifetime is a year, youth is spring, maturity is summer, autumn is old age, winter is death. Okay? So this is about old age and the approach of death. Okay? Now, the next one. As in me thou seest the twilight of such day, as after sunset fadeth in the west, which by and by black night doth take away, death's second self, that he seals up all in rest. Okay, now, here you have another metaphor, the one we saw before, of a lifetime is a day, where twilight is old age and night is death. Okay? So first, a lifetime is a year, autumn is old age, a lifetime is a day, twilight is old age. Finally, in me thou seest the glowing of such fire, that on the ashes of his youth doth lie, as the deathbed whereon it must expire, consumed with that which it was nourished by. A lifetime is a fire, and the beginning of the fire is when it's lit. When the fire is brightest is maturity, and the ashes, when you're down to the ashes in the coal, it's old age, and when the fire is out, it's death. Okay? Now, what we have in each case is a metaphor we see before. These are not unique metaphors of a lifetime as a day, a lifetime as a year, a lifetime as a fire. They show up over and over again. But now, why these through? For example, why isn't a lifetime a week? Why isn't a lifetime a bottle, or an apple, or a couch, or something else? Right? Why these 3? Day, year, fire. The answer is that there are primary metaphors that structure these. In every case, there's another metaphor, another 3 metaphors, and they go like this. That life is light and death is dark. That life is warm and death is cold. And that a lifetime is a cycle of increasing and then decreasing intensity. Okay? So, and those are primary metaphors because what you know about death. You know that if someone dies, they can't see anymore. The light goes out. Right? So, if someone dies, the body gets cold. So, death is cold. Life is warm. And you know that as someone matures, they get more and more active until they get older, and then they get less and less active and then die. So you have this cycle. Each of these cases has all three at once. A day has a part that is warmest, noon, the afternoon. It has a part that is coldest, night. It has a part that has the most light, the afternoon, a part that is dark, night. And it has increasing activity, more and more people do things toward the afternoon, and then decreasing activity night until it's dark. Okay? So that you have those three primary metaphors, all of them come together in each of the other three metaphors of a day, a year, and the fire. This is an extremely highly structured poem. It is structured by the primary metaphors about light, about heat, and about activity, and then the secondary metaphors about a day, a year, and the cycle. And then that poem is organized in terms of those three. Okay. Then there's a lot more I could go through, but I don't think I will. But let me point one thing out. There's another kind of metaphor besides a conceptual metaphor, and that is an image metaphor. And you see that here in the first stanza. That time of year thou mayst in me behold, when yellow leaves or none or few do hang upon those boughs which shake against the cold. Now, boughs of a tree are like arms of a person. There's an image mapping there, and the image is of an old man being cold and shaking against the cold. Right? So given that people are plants, again a conceptual metaphor, you have an image of a tree mapped onto an image of a person where the arms are boughs and the shaking boughs are like the shaking of a man's arms. Okay? So what you find in this poem is metaphor upon metaphor upon metaphor. And to understand them, you have to factor them out one at a time. See which ones are there. And you factor them out by knowing the collection of basic metaphors overall. Okay? Now, I thought what I would do next is let's see. Oh, I think what I'll do is go through another poem in which there are layers of metaphor. And to do that, let's consider this one. This is a poem by William Carlos Williams. It's called To a Solitary Disciple. Now, William Carlos Williams is a very famous American poet. He wrote in the 1920s and 30s. His profession was as a doctor. He was a doctor. He lived near New York City in New Jersey, just across the river from New York City. And he was a member of the New York Poetic Circles. And at the time, he was part of a literary movement that hated metaphor. But metaphor there was seen as in the Aristotelian sense of lots of ornamentation, of additional words that didn't matter, and so on. And what he tried to do was strip his poetry bare and to say, I'm writing without metaphor. Now, what's interesting about this is that when you actually read his poems, you see that there's metaphor everywhere, but not the overburdened kind, very subtle metaphor. So the reason that we chose this poem was we had given, Turner and I were running a seminar while we were writing the book, and we asked students to bring a poem in that had an example of metaphor. And a student brought in this poem and said, I found one metaphor in this poem. Okay? We will see there's metaphors in almost every word of the poem. But there'll be one that you'll try to see which one the student was talking about, and it will be obvious in some ways. So, let me go over the poem, and then go through the metaphorical structure of the poem. And then we'll see, once we do that, that there's a difference between what I'll call deep metaphor and surface metaphor. Okay? So first we're going to read it, then go through the surface metaphors, then talk about the deep metaphors. The poem goes like this. To a solitary disciple, and here the word disciple is being used in a religious sense, as someone entering the church, as you will see, becoming a monk. Being okay? Rather notice, mon cher, that the moon is tilted above the point of the steeple than that its color is shell pink. Rather observe that it is early morning than that the sky is smooth as a turquoise. Rather grasp how the dark converging lines of the steeple meet at the pinnacle. Perceive how its little ornament tries to stop them. See how it fails. See how the converging lines of the hexagonal spire escape upward, receding, dividing, sepals that guard and contain the flower. Observe how motionless the eaten moon lies in the protecting lines. It is true, in the light colors of morning, brownstone and slate shine orange and dark blue. But observe the oppressive weight of the squat edifice. Observe the jasmine lightness of the moon. Okay? I'll read it once more. Beautiful poem. To a solitary disciple. Rather notice, mon cher, that the moon is tilted above the point of the steeple than that its color is shell pink. Rather observe that it is early morning than that the sky is smooth as a turquoise. Rather grasp that how the dark converging lines of the steeple meet at the pinnacle. Perceive how its little ornament tries to stop them. See how it fails. See how the converging lines of the hexagonal spire escape upward, receding, dividing, sepals that guard and contain the flower. Observe how motionless the eaten moon lies in the protecting lines. It is true, in the light colors of morning, brownstone and slate shine orange and dark blue. But observe the oppressive weight of the squat edifice. Observe the jasmine lightness of the moon. Okay? Very beautiful poem. Now, you can see why this is a great poet. Now let's look at the details of this. He is pointing out a scene. The scene is a scene of a church building. Okay? It's a church building right there. And he's talking to a solitary disciple. Solitary because this person is becoming a monk. Disciple because he's studying under other people in the church. Okay? Rather notice, mon cher, that is mon cher, my dear one, cher from French, that the moon is tilted. The moon is tilted here above the point of the steeple. Okay, we have a scene first of the moon tilted above the point, right above the point of the steeple. okay, that the color of the moon is shell pink. It's like the pink of some sort of seashell. Rather observe, and notice each of one is observe this instead of that. That is, rather notice the tiltedness of the moon than the color of the moon. First, rather observe that it is early morning. Observe this instead of, right, than that the sky is smooth as a turquoise. Rather grasp how the dark converging lines of the steeple meet at the pinnacle. Perceive how its little ornament tries to stop them. Okay, so you have these guys, here's the lines converging at the pinnacle. There's an ornament up top, and you imagine the lines, the ornament trying to stop the lines from going into the sky. See how it tries to stop them. See how it fails. That means the lines go into the sky. The lines defining the steeple are now going up into the sky. Sepals, that is the petals of a flower, right? The petals on the inside of the flower, there's little sepals, right? Sepals that that guard and contain the flower. So you have this image of these lines going up into the sky, they become sepals, and inside them is a flower that the sepals, the outside of the flower, those green parts that keep the leaves in, guard and protect the flower. Okay? That's the image. Observe how motionless the eaten moon. So we have the moon, and the moon is a crescent. It has a bite taken out of it. That was the metaphor that the student noticed. Right? The eaten moon has a little bite taken out of it. It's like a crescent. Is tilted. For it to be tilted, it means the crescent is tilted. Okay? And it says, observe how motionless the eaten moon lies in the protecting lines. So the moon is now in the protecting lines where the flower is. Okay? It is true, in the light colors of morning, brownstone and slate, that is this brown color, and slate, which is a dark grayish black, shine orange and dark blue. The colors look brighter, bright orange, orange instead of brown, dark blue instead of gray slate. But observe the oppressive weight, the heaviness of the squat. Squat is like this, edifice. It's a low building. Observe the jasmine lightness, which we'll talk about, of the moon above the steeple. It says, rather notice that the moon is tilted. That is, it's not like perfectly symmetrical. It's at an angle. It's tilted. It's imperfect if it's tilted. It's not perfectly balanced. It's an imperfect, imperfect vision. If it were a perfectly balanced vision, you'd have the moon like round right above the steeple, but it's not that. It's, a crescent moon tilted. Okay? All right? Notice that instead of noticing this beautiful color of the moon, at dawn, the moon looks a little bit pink. It's a very beautiful color. Notice the imperfection of the moon rather than its beautiful color. So this is about he's telling you what you should notice and what you shouldn't. Rather observe that it is early morning. Why morning? We have a day, right? And this is the beginning of a life or a career. He's going into the church. So this is a beginning, early morning. The rest of the day is the following out of either a life or a career. He's going to have a life in the church, and this is its beginning. So we have, again, a lifetime is a day. Rather, notice it is early morning. Pay attention to the earliness rather than the sky is smooth as a turquoise. Now, what could it mean for the sky to be smooth as a turquoise? A turquoise is this nice blue, sort of precious stone. Right? Why smooth? We have a general metaphor that seeing is touching, where your eyes can pick out every detail of the pattern, where you can run your eyes over the wall, and so on. Here, you are running your eyes over the sky, and it is smooth means there's nothing else in the sky. You know, the stars are gone, completely clear sky. The sky is smooth as you run your eyes over it. So here you have a metaphor shaping the image, right? This is a poet who cares about creating images, and he's using a metaphor to shape that image. Okay? Now, rather grasp. Understanding is grasping. Right? Basic metaphor, understanding is grasping. Rather grasp means understand. Rather grasp how the dark converging lines of the steeple. Now the steeple is dark, and remember this darkness, it will be important in a while, how the dark converging lines of the steeple meet at the pinnacle. Now, there's a very important metaphor here. It is a metaphor discovered by Leonard Talmy, who writes about what he calls fictive motion. Fictive motion is when you understand a shape in terms of something moving, tracing that shape. Here you see the lines as if they're stationary. It's just a steeple. But see how they meet, that is, they're moving. So this is the fictive motion metaphor, that a shape is the motion tracing that shape. See how they meet at the pinnacle. Then, given that metaphor, it's extended. See how it tries to stop them. Right? Now he's creating an image, but he's using the fictive motion metaphor to create the image. Then he says, you're looking at this church and a steeple. Now, what is a steeple for on a Christian church? A steeple is pointing to God in heaven. Right? That's what it's about. It's supposed to point to heaven where God lives. It's supposed to make you look up to God, think about God. That's why they have steeples. Okay? So, see how the lines of the church go beyond the top of the steeple into heaven, into the sky. Right? So we have going from the earthly to the divine, above the top of the steeple. Right? So what's above it is the divine. And there we have, see how the dark converging lines of the steeple meet at the pinnacle. Perceive how its ornament tries to stop them. See how it fails. That is, the physical church cannot stop you from thinking about the divine. If you go and trace the lines of the church itself will make you think of the divine. The physical church can't allow you to stop there. Right? That's what steeples are about. They take your eye up. And therefore, through seeing as knowing, they make you think about what's up there. Okay? See how it fails. See how the converging lines of the hexagonal spire escape upward. This is trying to stop them. We'll come back to that. Receding, dividing. Lines are receding and dividing in the sky. Okay? See, then you have another image metaphor. These lines via an image metaphor are like the sepals, the green part outside the flower that guards and protects the flower. Okay? Now, what is the flower? The flower is the most delicate and important part. The sepals are this hard stuff on the outside. But it's the flower that allows for later creativity and so on. So that's the delicate and important and beautiful part. And it says, look at that. Look at that beautiful, delicate part with these other things, these other lines guarding it and protecting it. Then he says, observe how motionless The Eaton moon. What's the Eaton moon? We have this round thing with a bite taken out of it. What's the image metaphor? It's the wafer that you take a bite out of in communion, mapped onto the moon. So that this is about the body of Christ, the body of God up there. You're looking at the sacred, the moon. Okay? And that is the flower. Notice it's in the same place. So he says, notice how motionless the Eaton moon lies in the protecting lines, and exactly where the flower is. So the flower of the church is Christ, is God. Okay? That's what you should be thinking about if you're going to become a monk. Okay? Now, it is true, in the light colors of morning, brownstone and slate shine orange and dark blue. Okay? He's saying, if you look at the colors of this building, the colors of the building are really ugly. They're brown and they're slate, they're black, they're sort of yucky. But at the beautiful time of the morning, when you're starting out, when the day is just starting, the light changes the colors into something beautiful, orange and dark blue. That is, metaphorically now, this is the beginning of becoming a monk. And going into the church looks really great, right? That is, the light at the beginning makes the sort of ugliness of the church look beautiful. Okay? But he says, but observe, says, on the contrary, observe the oppressive weight of the squat edifice. Why oppressive and then weight? He's saying this building is heavy. And in doing this, he's not just talking about the building. There's a general metaphor that institutions are buildings. Right? For example, in America, we speak of the White House as meaning the presidency. Right? That institution. Right? Very common metaphor of buildings, institutions are buildings. And he's saying the church as an institution is represented by this building. And it is heavy. It has duties. There's a metaphor that difficulties are burdens that weigh you down. He says, this is going to be hard. Becoming a monk is hard. It's going to be difficult. It's a burden to go into the church. And it's oppressive. It's going to weigh you down. It's not going to be a nice experience. It's going to be a difficult experience. Okay? It says, observe the oppressive weight of the squat edifice. That is, the institution of the church is going to be hard on you. And then he says, observe the jasmine lightness of the moon. He says, when you're becoming a monk, don't pay attention to the oppressiveness of the institution. Look at God, the moon, which is God up there. The jasmine lightness. What are the metaphors for light? You know, light is moral, light is good, light is enlightening. It teaches you things, right? That is, knowing is seeing, light enlightens you, right? Observe, and then it's light, it's not heavy. So where it's difficult, what makes it easy, what makes it worthwhile is the lightness of the moon and its jasmine lightness, because it smells beautiful, it's sensual. Observe the sensuality of being religious. Okay? So, this is a poem. Let's go back through it again, and you'll see more of it. Rather, notice, mon cher, that the moon is tilted above this. That is, God is not perfect. Tilted, once you see that in the poem. But it says, notice this imperfect God above the color of the moon. Rather, observe that it's early morning. Pay attention that this is the beginning. rather than the sky is smooth as a turquoise. Don't just look at the beauty of the sky. Notice where you are in your life. Rather, grasp how the dark converging lines of the steeple, dark. The physical building is dark, and darkness it has a meaning. The metaphor is that bad is dark, immoral is dark. There's immorality all through the church. There are bad things in the church. There's a dark side of the church. This is a dark steeple. The dark converging lines of the steeple meet at the pinnacle. How the very top of the church, or the physical building, will try to keep them in, but they point to God and they escape. So what you're doing is allow them to escape and pay attention to what's up there, the flower and the moon. And then they fit together. They become God with lightness and so on. So you can see what he's talking about in this poem is someone who is, he's doing a description of the building. But in describing the building, he is giving a lesson about what it means to go into the institution. Okay? That's the structure of the poem. Now, Williams is also a poet and a master poet. And in doing this, in talking to someone who's going into the church, becoming a poet is like becoming a novice in the church. There's another reading of this that says, when you become a poet, there's an institution of poetry. And it's not a nice institution. You know, if you actually know the institution of poets and you start experiencing it, it's like the institution of a religion. There's all the bad things of a religion that you find in the institution of being a poet. But pay attention to really why you become a poet, because it's beautiful. Okay. That's the metaphorical structure of that poem. It is metaphor upon metaphor upon metaphor upon metaphor, and then the whole meaning of the poem is another metaphor. The image metaphor, like the Eton moon, is a very surface metaphor. The metaphor of the whole poem is about understanding the description of the physical church as a description of the process of entering the institution. And then there is a higher order reading about becoming a poet. Okay? So when you read a poem like this, if you understand the basic metaphorical structure of the mind, if you know that the mind is structured with all of these metaphors, it's possible to unpack all of the metaphors and see the extraordinary way in which a great poet puts them together into something of great beauty. Okay? Now, I'd like to finish up with a description of some poems from the Asian poetic tradition. And in this book we go through a number of them, and let me just go through some here. There is a very interesting poet in America, William S. Merwin, called W.S. Merwin, who is also a translator, a very, very excellent translator, especially of Asian poetry. And he has a book called Asian Figures, where he takes poems from various traditions, from the Chinese tradition, from Japanese, Burmese, and so on, a number of Korean, a number of these poems throughout the book, and they're very short poems, extremely short poems, like epigraphs. And what he does is translate them into English, usually in a very beautiful way. So what I'd like to do is go through this with a few of these that I've taken out of Asian Figures from the various traditions. and then talk about how they're understood metaphorically. Okay? The first one, I'll read a number. I'll just go through them, read them, and then pick some to do. Charcoal writes everybody's name black. Charcoal writes everybody's name black. Blind blames the ditch. Blind blames the ditch. Big thunder, little rain. Jelly in a vice. Jelly in a vice. Okay? Not big, but a pepper. Not big, but a pepper. Cows run with the wind, horses against it. Cows run with the wind, horses against it. Cow, parched by the sun, pants at the moon. Cow, parched by the sun, pants, that is, breathes heavily at the moon. Burned lips on broth, now blows on cold water. Burned lips on broth, now blows on cold water. Frog forgets he had a tail. Frog forgets he had a tail. Cow in the stream, eating from both banks. Cow in the stream, eating from both banks. Knife can't whittle its own handle. Knife can't whittle its own handle. Any weather, chicken's pants are rolled up. Any weather, chicken's pants are rolled up. The rats decide the cat ought to be belled. The rats decide the cat ought to be belled. And ants on a millstone, whichever way they walk, they go around with it. Ants on a millstone, whichever way they walk, they go around with it. Okay. I assume that these kinds of poems are familiar to most of you. And the question, and if they're not, they should be. These are traditional poems from your tradition. What I'd like to do is go through them bit by bit. And we discovered as we did this that we were interpreting them from a Western perspective. And in the middle of doing so, we spoke to someone from a Chinese tradition, and they said, "Oh no, you've interpreted it completely backwards." So what I will do is give you both interpretations and explain why we interpreted them backwards. Okay. Now, charcoal writes everybody's name black. Okay? Now, first, there's a simple metaphorical interpretation. What do we know about charcoal? A piece of burned wood, and it has one property, basically. If you touch it, you get black. I mean, that's what it is. So the only thing that charcoal can do is write black. And one way to understand this is to say that being black and giving off blackness is the essential property of what defines charcoal. It's the essence of charcoal. And if you think of a person as having a single essence, that is the only thing that they can do, then that's all they can do. So if you know a person who only can do one thing, don't expect it to do anything else. That's what you can do. So that's a simple interpretation. But it's not really enough, because why name? We have a metaphor that a reputation is a name. You give someone a bad name. You want to protect your name. Okay? So, and black is a metaphor that moral is black, moral is white, and immoral is black. Right? And writing is a form of communication, so that you can understand writing as communicating. Okay? So this says the following. So writes everyone's names, if it says write someone's name's black, it says it communicates the reputation as immoral. It says bad things about people. Now, if black is immorality, then charcoal is and if that's the essential property of charcoal, it says that an immoral person will make everybody else sound immoral, will say bad things about other people. Okay? So that's another interpretation. And there may be more. By the way, if you think of more during the question period, please bring them up. And by the way, if you think that I've given a Western interpretation to these, please tell me what the other interpretation would be. All right. Blind blames the ditch. Okay? Blind blames the ditch. Now, the idea here is that you have a blind person and you have a scenario. When you say blames the ditch, it says you have somebody who's going out walking, falls into a ditch, and he doesn't blame himself, he blames the ditch for being there. Okay? Now, and you know about this, that if you're blind, you shouldn't just go out walking without feeling where you're going and seeing if there might be ditches around, because you could get hurt. You should take precautions if you're blind. And you should be blaming yourself instead of the ditch. Okay? Now, this is not just about a blind person, because the metaphor is knowing is seeing. It says, take that metaphor, it says, not blind, but ignorant. Someone who doesn't know things. An ignorant person, right? If someone is ignorant and doesn't know things, they should know that they're ignorant. And if you're an ignorant person, if you don't know things, you should know you don't know things and take precautions about that. Because if you're an ignorant person, bad things can happen to you because you don't know things. Right? And falling into the ditch, falling metaphorically, is failing. Failure is falling, in one of our major metaphors. So it says that you can fail at something because you're ignorant. And you shouldn't be blaming the external thing, you should be blaming your own ignorance. Okay? So, blind blames the ditch. And you can see a number of metaphors structuring that interpretation. Okay. Not big, but a pepper. Okay? What do we know about a pepper? You can have a red pepper, is small but very strong. Right? It can have a great effect. Right? So it says that someone who isn't big can have a great effect, but why big? There's a general metaphor that important is big and unimportant is small. So it says that an unimportant person who has the right personality, that is internal structure, quality like a pepper, that is, can have a personality to have a big effect. And this is saying of someone, this is a person who may not be impressive and important, but has a major effect. Okay? Not big, but a pepper. And notice each one, the metaphors are ordinary, everyday metaphors. Important is big, for example. Okay. Frog forgets he had a tail. Frog forgets he had a tail. Now, we know about frogs that they develop from tadpoles, and tadpoles have tails. Okay? And animals with tails are on a lower point in the hierarchy of animals than animals without tails. So there's a hierarchy in the world of animals. Okay? Now, also, where is the tail on a tadpole? It's behind. The future is ahead, the past is behind. So, frog forgets he had a tail is talking about someone who is higher in the social order than a tadpole, than a lower animal, who's a higher person. This is based on the great chain of being in which you have higher animals above lower animals and higher people above lower people. Okay? It's this hierarchical view of nature. And it says that you have a frog who is higher on the chain than a tadpole, that is a person who is higher than someone who is at a lower rank. But it says had a tail in the past, he was at the lower rank. So this is said about someone who forgets that he started out, who is at a higher rank, forgetting that he started out at a lower rank. And why is that important? Because someone who had started out at a lower rank should have empathy for some other people at lower ranks. It says this is an arrogant person. Frog forgets he had a tail. Okay? And notice all the metaphors. Frog forgets he had a tail. 6 words, more than 6 metaphors. Right? The metaphors are not in the words, they're in your mind. Okay? Knife can't whittle its own handle. Knife can't whittle its own handle. Now, a knife is an important tool or instrument, and it can be a weapon. It can be something powerful and important, right? But, obviously it can't whittle its own handle. Is that interesting? No. This is about people. And it says, and notice, it's about shaping. That people don't shape themselves. It takes just as it takes other knives to whittle the handle of a knife, so it takes other people to shape you. So no matter how effective you are as a person, you're a sharp person, you're a knife. No matter how effective you are, you did not create yourself. Other people made you into a knife. Okay? It has a moral lesson associated with it. Don't forget the other people who made you what you are. Knife cannot whittle its own handle. Okay? The rats decide the cat ought to be belled. Okay? The rats decide the cat ought to be belled. Well, first we know that the cat eats mice. Okay? The cat is a threat to mice. The cat is higher, it's a predator, higher on the rank of animals than the lowly mice, and it preys on the mice. Okay? Now, that is a fact of nature. Mice can't change cats. But if someone puts a bell on a cat, that will protect the mice because when the cat comes, they can get away. Right? So, it says that the people who are threatened by more powerful people in authority decide that there should be a check on the more powerful people, but they can't impose that check. Right? It says this is a situation that people cannot change. That you may fool yourself into thinking that you can change the more powerful people, but you can't. Okay? Very Confucian. Ants on a millstone. Ants on a millstone. A millstone is this huge round stone, very thick, enormous stone. Ants are tiny with respect to the millstone. The millstone goes around reasonably fast, grinding the grain. So it's moving around fast. And the ants are in this tiny portion of the millstone, and they're just walking relative to the local part of the millstone. They can go a little bit. So that's what the image of ants on a millstone is. And it says, whichever way they walk, they go around with it. It says, you are an ant. Right? And the world is this millstone. And it is moving, that is, there are actions and events in the world that you can't control and can't even see or comprehend. And you are going to be affected by them. It's going to make you move. It's going to change your state. You're going to go around with it and never know why. Okay? You're all ants on a millstone. Okay. Let me finish with the example that we first misinterpreted. And you can judge the misinterpretation yourself. It is this one. Cows run with the wind. Cows run with the wind, horses against it. Cows run with the wind, horses against it. Now, when we first looked at this, we interpreted it from a Western perspective. In American mythology, horses are noble animals and cows are not. Horses are really great things. They give you freedom. They allow you to go out into the range and explore. They're about, breaking with tradition. Pioneers rode horses. They didn't have cows. Cows are domesticated. They're boring. They're uninteresting. So the idea here is, notice, and also in American tradition, it's important to go against the tradition. It's important to stop, to do something new, to find a frontier and break through it, to make changes. Right? That's what's respected in the Western tradition. So when a Westerner hears cows run with the wind, that is, what's with the wind? Right? If you look at the event structure metaphor, in which states are locations and action is motion, a wind is an and forces are causes. Causes are forces. A wind is an external force, like an external cause, and they help you move in a certain direction. So the wind is something like going with the wind as opposed to against it, means the wind is all the external things that are happening in the world, and going with it means going along with what everybody else is doing. Right? Going against it is not going along with what people are doing, and it slows you down, it makes it hard to do things, it's difficult. But when you say horses against it, it means it's noble, it's good to go against the prevailing forces. Okay? And that was our interpretation. It is not the Chinese interpretation. As we are told, in Chinese culture, it is good to go along with tradition. It is good to do what other people have done. Right? And It is good to have cows because cows sustain you. Cows give you milk and meat and all the good things of a family life. Horses, don't do any of those things, right? So this says that cows are the good things, and the horses are these useless guys, and the guys who go against the tradition don't sustain you, don't help you, don't do the good things of building the family. Okay? Now, I don't know if that's the correct interpretation, but you will tell me soon because the lecture is now completed. Questions? And